My marriage was like my old Honda. Looked great at a distance, but you'd never want to pop the hood. The engine was shot, the transmission leaked lies, and the whole damn thing was held together with duct tape and delusion. I'm Alex Russo, 34 years old, mechanical engineer by trade, sucker by marriage. My wife Sandra had the kind of beauty that made men stupid, and the kind of personality that kept them that way. She was an accountant who could balance books, but never seemed to balance her priorities. "Alex, you're embarrassing me," Sandra hissed across the dinner table at Romano's, our usual Friday night spot. Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against her wineglass like tiny hammers of judgment. "That waitress has been flirting with you all night, and you're just sitting there like a dead fish." I glanced at the waitress, Jenny, according to her name tag. She was cute in a girl next door way, all smiles and dimples, nothing like Sandra's ice queen perfection. "Maybe she's just being friendly," I said, cutting into my overpriced steak. "Some people are naturally nice. You should try it sometime." Sandra's friends, Melissa and Carol, two carbon copies of my wife in different shades of blonde, giggled like hyenas. They always found Sandra's put-downs hilarious, especially when I was the target. "Oh, please," Sandra rolled her eyes. "She practically threw herself at you when she took our order. It's pathetic, really. A woman that desperate." "Unlike you, who's never desperate for anything," I muttered. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before I could answer, Jenny appeared at our table with a bright smile. "How's everything tasting tonight?" "Wonderful, thank you," Sandra said with fake sweetness, the kind that could give you diabetes. Jenny turned to me. "And how's your steak, sir?" "Perfect, thanks." I smiled back, and for a moment, it felt good to have someone look at me like I wasn't a complete failure. As Jenny walked away, she slipped a small piece of paper next to my plate. Sandra's face went pale, then flushed red. Her friends leaned forward, like vultures, sensing fresh carrion. "What does it say?" Melissa whispered, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. I unfolded the note. In neat handwriting, it read, "You seem like you could use a friend. Call me if you want to talk. Jenny." Followed by her phone number. Sandra snatched the paper from my hands. "This is humiliating. Everyone's staring at us." She was right. The tables around us had gone quiet, their occupants pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. In a town like ours, gossip traveled faster than bad news, and this would be all over social media before we finished dessert. "You're just jealous that someone actually finds me attractive," I said, louder than necessary. Sandra's mouth dropped open. "Jealous? Of some desperate waitress hitting on my husband? Please." But I saw the crack in her armor, the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Sandra had always been confident that she was the prize in our relationship, the one doing me a favor by staying married. The idea that another woman might want me clearly rattled her. We drove home in silence, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Our house was in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy but respectable. Sandra had always complained it wasn't good enough, that we should be living in something more befitting her family's status. Her family. The Morettis. Old money, or at least they pretended to be. Isabella Moretti, Sandra's mother, treated me like something she'd scrape off her shoe. She never missed a chance to remind Sandra that she could do better than a mere engineer. "Sandra, darling," Isabella would say in that condescending tone of hers, "when are you going to find yourself a real man? Someone with ambition?" Sandra's father, Marco, was the opposite. Quiet, meek, completely overshadowed by his domineering wife. I sometimes wondered if he saw himself in me. Two men who'd married above their station and were paying for it daily. Then there was Sandra's sister, Serena, married to Arnold Klein. Arnold owned a chain of gyms and never let anyone forget it. He was the kind of guy who wore tank tops to show off his muscles and talked about crushing it in every conversation. Serena was fragile, struggling with infertility, and Arnold's solution was always the same. "Just stay positive, babe. Good vibes only." Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Sandra working late more often. Secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. Spa weekends with her girlfriends that left her more stressed than relaxed. I always thought I'd be the hero of my own story. Turns out, I was cast as the punchline. One Tuesday evening, I came home early from a job site to find Sandra on the phone in our bedroom. The door was cracked open, and her voice carried down the hallway. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow," she was saying, her voice soft and breathy in a way it hadn't been with me in years. "Alex will be at work until 6, so we'll have plenty of time." My blood turned to ice water. I know, baby. I feel terrible about lying, but what choice do I have? He'd never understand. A pause. Of course I love you. More than anything. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. 20 minutes later, Sandra came downstairs, acting like nothing had happened. How was work? She asked, not looking up from her phone. Fine, I managed. How was your day? Boring. Same old stuff at the office. Liar. I started paying closer attention to her phone, her schedule, her behavior. The coded texts that made her smile. The new lingerie that never made an appearance in our bedroom. The way she'd disappear for hours on weekend afternoons, claiming she was shopping or meeting friends. If only I got paid for every lie I found, I could have retired by Christmas. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I was cleaning out Sandra's car, something she'd asked me to do, when I found a receipt tucked under the passenger seat. The Ritz-Carlton, downtown Boston. Room service for 2. Champagne. Strawberries. The works. At the bottom, someone had written in masculine handwriting, "To Sandra, my wildcat." Until next time. A. Arnold. My brother-in-law was sleeping with my wife. The receipt sat on my workbench like a piece of evidence in a murder trial, which, in a way, it was. The murder of my marriage, my trust, my entire life as I knew it. Arnold Klein, the muscle-bound moron who called everyone buddy and champ like he was still in high school. The same guy who'd slapped my back at family dinners and told me how lucky I was to have Sandra. The same guy who was married to Sandra's heartbroken sister. I spent the next week playing detective, and let me tell you, if Sandra and Arnold were trying to be subtle, they failed spectacularly. Her credit card statement showed regular visits to his gym during lunch breaks. His Instagram stories featured mysterious client meetings that coincided perfectly with her extended lunch hours. The worst part? Sandra's friends knew. I could tell from the way they looked at me now, part pity, part amusement, like I was some pathetic creature they'd found wounded on the side of the road. He's so clueless, I overheard Melissa telling Carol at the grocery store. Sandra says he'd need GPS to find his own pride. They laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. That's when I decided to stop being the punchline. My first move was simple. Confront Arnold directly. I waited until Saturday morning, when his main gym would be packed with weekend warriors trying to work off their Friday night sins. Klein's fitness was everything you'd expect from a guy like Arnold. All chrome and mirrors with motivational posters featuring half-naked people and slogans like, "Pain is weakness leaving the body." The air reeked of sweat, protein powder, and desperation. I found Arnold in his office, a glass-walled box overlooking the main floor where he could watch his kingdom and make sure everyone saw him being important. He was on the phone, feet up on his desk, laughing at something. "Yeah, she's completely clueless," he was saying. "Thinks I'm working on some big expansion deal." Meanwhile, her husband's probably at home playing with his little tools. I knocked on the door. Arnold looked up, and his face went through several interesting color changes. "Hey, Alex! Buddy, what brings you by?" He hung up quickly, all fake smiles and nervous energy. "We need to talk," I said, stepping into his office and closing the door behind me. Sure. Always got time for family. Want some protein powder? I've got this new flavor that's absolutely..." I slammed the hotel receipt down on his desk. "Cut the crap, Arnold." The smile melted off his face, like ice cream in August. "I don't know what you think that is, but it's a receipt from the Ritz-Carlton. Room service for 2. Signed by you. For my wife." Arnold stood up, all 6 feet of manufactured muscle trying to intimidate me. "You need to calm down, buddy. You're making some serious accusations here." "Am I?" "Because I've got credit card statements, phone records, and about a dozen witnesses who've seen you two together when you thought nobody was looking." His jaw clenched. "Look, Alex, I don't know what Sandra's told you. Sandra hasn't told me anything. She's too busy lying to my face every day." I stepped closer. "But you're going to tell me everything. Right now." "Or what?" "Or I tell Serena and your gym members. And anyone else will listen about how Arnold Klein, family man and fitness guru, likes to work out with his sister-in-law." For a moment, I thought he might take a swing at me. His fists clenched, his face flushed red, and the vein in his forehead started pulsing like a neon sign. Instead, he laughed. "You think anyone would believe you? Look at yourself, Alex. You're a nobody, a grease monkey who got lucky enough to marry up. Sandra's with me because I can give her things you never could.
Like what?
Steroids and protein shakes? Like respect. Like passion. Like a real man who knows how to treat a woman. That's when I lost it. My hand moved before my brain could stop it, connecting with his cheek in a slap that echoed through the glass office like a gunshot. The entire gym went quiet. Every treadmill, every weight machine, every conversation stopped as dozens of people turned to stare at us through the glass walls. Arnold touched his cheek, his eyes wide with shock and rage. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. No, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The biggest mistake of my life was trusting you around my wife. But don't worry, I won't make that mistake again. I walked out of his office with every eye in the place following me. By the time I reached my car, I could see people pulling out their phones, recording videos, posting to social media. Arnold's public humiliation had begun. But I wasn't done, not even close. That night, I paid a visit to Arnold's pride and joy, his cherry red Mustang convertible, parked in his driveway like a monument to his ego. It took me about 15 minutes to remove all the lug nuts from his wheels, leaving them just loose enough to stay on until he hit his first turn or pothole. I left a note under his windshield wiper. Careful, your wheels might fall off, just like your morals. The next morning, Arnold's car collapsed at the intersection of Main and Elm, right in front of the coffee shop where half the town got their morning caffeine fix. The wheels rolled in 4 different directions, while Arnold sat in the middle of the street, looking like the fool he was. The video went viral within hours. Sandra's mother called me that afternoon. Alexander, Isabella's voice dripped with disdain. What you did to poor Arnold was inexcusable. He could have been killed. He could have thought about that before he decided to sleep with my wife, I replied. That's a vicious lie, and you know it. Arnold is a good man, a family man. A family man who's been screwing Sandra for months while his wife cries herself to sleep every night. The line went quiet for a long moment. You're a dangerous man, Alexander. A brute. Sandra deserves better. You're right, I said. She deserves exactly what she's going to get. I hung up and started planning my next move. Sandra came home that evening like a woman walking to her own execution. She'd heard about Arnold's car, of course. The whole town had. The video of him sitting in the middle of the intersection, surrounded by his scattered wheels, had been shared thousands of times across every social media platform. We need to talk, she said, setting her purse down with shaking hands. Do we? Because I've been trying to talk to you for months. But you've been too busy with your client meetings and spa weekends. Her face went white. Alex, I don't know what you think you know. I know about Arnold. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Sandra's mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. I know about the hotel rooms, the secret phone calls, the lies. I pulled out my phone and opened her messaging app. Amazing how easy it was to sync devices when you shared an Apple ID. I know about all of it. Sandra's eyes went wide when she saw her own messages displayed on my screen. Months of flirtation, planning, explicit photos, and promises to get rid of Alex once they figured out how to do it without losing the house. You went through my phone? She whispered. Your phone? Sandra, we're married. We share everything, remember? Including cloud storage. What Sandra didn't know was that I'd already forwarded the most damaging screenshots to several key contacts. Her mother, her sister, her boss, and the family group chat that included aunts, uncles, and cousins from both sides. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Then Sandra's phone joined in. Then the house phone. What did you do? Sandra grabbed for my phone, but I pulled it away. I shared your messages with the people who matter most to you. Your family, your coworkers, everyone who thought you were such a perfect wife and daughter. Sandra's face cycled through several emotions: fear, anger, desperation, and finally, rage. You bastard! You have no right! No right! I'm your husband! I had every right to know that my wife was planning to destroy our marriage for some muscle-bound moron who can't even spell commitment. The house phone rang again. Sandra lunged for it. Mom, I can explain. Her face crumpled as Isabella's voice screeched through the receiver, loud enough for me to hear every word of disappointment and shame. Over the next hour, the calls kept coming. Serena, sobbing and demanding to know if it was true. Sandra's boss, asking if she needed to take some personal time to deal with her situation. Cousins, aunts, family friends, all of them wanting answers, explanations, apologies. If shame burned calories, Sandra could finally fit into her high school jeans. But the real fireworks came 3 days later, at the monthly Moretti family dinner. These gatherings were sacred to Isabella. Mandatory attendance, formal dress code, and enough passive-aggressive small talk to power a small city. I arrived early, ostensibly to help set up, but really to make sure I had the best seat in the house for what was about to happen. Sandra showed up late, looking like she'd aged 5 years in 3 days. Arnold wasn't there. Apparently, he was dealing with some business issues at the gym. Isabella had prepared her usual feast, but the atmosphere was funeral quiet. Everyone knew about the messages, the affair, the scandal that was tearing the family apart. Serena sat at the far end of the table, her eyes red and puffy, refusing to look at Sandra. "Well," Isabella said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, "I suppose we should address the elephant in the room." "Mom, please," Sandra whispered. "Not here." "Not here? Where then, Sandra? In some hotel room? In Arnold's office? Where exactly is appropriate for discussing your betrayal of this family?" The table fell silent, except for the sound of Serena's quiet sobbing. That's when I played my ace in the hole. "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I think everyone should hear this." I hit play on a voicemail Arnold had left Sandra 2 weeks earlier. His voice filled the dining room, crude and arrogant. "Hey, Wildcat. Just finished my workout, and I'm thinking about you. Your husband's such an idiot. I can't believe he hasn't figured us out yet. Can't wait until he's gone and we can stop sneaking around. I've got some ideas for tonight that'll make you forget all about your boring marriage." The message went on for another 30 seconds, getting progressively more explicit and cruel. By the time it ended, you could have heard a pin drop in the next county. Isabella's face had gone completely white. Marco sat frozen, his fork halfway to his mouth. Serena was staring at Sandra with a look of pure hatred. "How could you?" Serena's voice was barely a whisper. "How could you do this to me? To your own sister?" Sandra tried to speak, but Isabella cut her off. "Get out." The words were quiet, but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Get out of my house. Get out of this family. You are no daughter of mine." "Mom, please, let me explain." "There is nothing to explain." Isabella stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "You have disgraced yourself, your marriage, your sister, and this entire family. I don't want to see your face again." Sandra looked around the table desperately, seeking any ally, any sympathetic face. She found none. Even her father, gentle Marco, who never raised his voice, was looking at her with disappointment and shame. "This is all your fault," Sandra said, turning on me with fury in her eyes. "You set this up. You planned this." "I didn't plan anything, Sandra. I just shared your own words with your own family. If you're embarrassed by what you did, maybe you shouldn't have done it." Serena stood up abruptly, her chair falling backward. "I hope you rot together," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I hope you get exactly what you deserve." She ran from the room, leaving Sandra standing there like a pariah at her own family's table. Sandra's job situation got worse over the following week. Her boss, Margaret Chen, had always prided herself on running a family-friendly accounting firm. Having an employee whose personal scandals were being discussed all over town wasn't exactly good for business. "Sandra," Margaret said during what was supposed to be a routine check-in meeting, "I think you should consider taking some extended leave. Just until things settle down." "You're suspending me?" Sandra's voice cracked. "Because of my personal life? I'm offering you the opportunity to handle your personal affairs without the pressure of work responsibilities. Several clients have expressed concerns. Translation: Sandra was toxic to the business, and everyone knew it. By the end of the week, Sandra had lost her job, her family, and most of her friends. The few who still talked to her did so with a kind of morbid curiosity usually reserved for car accidents and reality TV shows. Arnold wasn't faring much better. Serena had filed for divorce and was demanding half of everything, including his precious gems. His business was suffering too. Apparently, people didn't want to get fitness advice from a guy who couldn't keep his own life together. But I wasn't done with him yet. Not even close. 2 months later, Sandra and I were still living in the same house, but we might as well have been on different planets. She slept in the guest room, I stayed in the basement workshop, and we communicated through lawyers and passive-aggressive notes left on the kitchen counter. The divorce proceedings were ugly. Sandra wanted half of everything, including my engineering business and the house my grandfather had left me. Her lawyer was some shark in an expensive suit who specialized in maximizing asset recovery for wronged spouses. Wronged spouses. The irony was thick enough to choke on. What Sandra didn't know was that I'd been planning my exit strategy for months, ever since I'd found that first hotel receipt. Every asset that could be moved had been moved. Every account that could be emptied had been emptied. Every piece of evidence that could be gathered had been gathered. My friend Elliot, who worked in IT and had a talent for finding information that people thought was private, had been invaluable in this process. "Dude," he said, showing me his latest discovery, "you're not going to believe what I found about Arnold's gym finances." Klein's Fitness wasn't just struggling, it was hemorrhaging money. Arnold had been cooking the books, inflating membership numbers, and taking out loans against equipment he didn't actually own. The whole operation was a house of cards waiting to fall. "And Sandra?" I asked. "Oh, she's been helping him. Look at these transfers from her personal account to his business account. She's been funding his lifestyle for months." So my wife hadn't just been cheating on me, she'd been stealing from our joint savings to support her lover's failing business. The betrayal kept getting deeper. That's when I decided it was time for the final act. I waited for a night when I knew they'd both be desperate enough to do something stupid. Sandra had been dropping hints about needing money, about how unfair the divorce settlement was, about how I was hiding assets from her. She wasn't wrong. I had been hiding assets in a new account in Montreal, where I'd already lined up a job with an engineering firm that specialized in hydroelectric systems. My escape plan was ready. I just needed to give Sandra and Arnold enough rope to hang themselves. I made a show of leaving for a weekend business trip, complete with packed bags and a hotel reservation in Albany. What I actually did was drive to Elliot's apartment and wait. Sure enough, at 11:47 p.m. on Saturday night, my security system sent an alert to my phone. 2 figures were breaking into my house through the back door. The same door Sandra had a key for, but apparently she wanted to make it look like a real break-in. I watched through the security cameras as Sandra and Arnold crept through my house with flashlights, looking for anything valuable they could steal. They went straight for my workshop, where they thought I kept cash and important documents. What they found instead was a surprise I'd been preparing for weeks. The moment Arnold stepped through the workshop door, motion sensors triggered a series of events that would have made Rube Goldberg proud. Paint bombs exploded from the ceiling, covering him in bright blue latex paint. The floor, which I'd coated with a slippery substance, sent him sliding into a wall of boxes that collapsed on top of him. Sandra, trying to help, triggered her own trap, a bucket of glitter that dumped over her head, followed by a siren loud enough to wake the dead, and bright floodlights that lit up the entire backyard. I'd also rigged the doors to lock automatically once they were inside, trapping them in the workshop while the security system recorded everything and automatically uploaded it to the cloud. By the time I arrived home, with Elliot and 3 neighbors as witnesses, Arnold was covered head to toe in blue paint, sitting in a puddle of glue and cursing at the top of his lungs. Sandra was sparkling like a disco ball, crying and trying to wipe glitter out of her eyes. "Well, well," I said, as the neighbors recorded everything on their phones. "What do we have here?" "Alex, please," Sandra sobbed. "We can explain." "Explain what? How you broke into my house to steal from me? How you've been embezzling money to fund your boyfriend's failing business? How you thought you could rob me blind and I'd never figure it out?" Arnold tried to stand up, but slipped again, landing hard on his paint-covered backside. "This is assault. I'm calling the cops." "Please do," I said, holding up my phone. "I've got everything recorded. Breaking and entering, attempted theft, destruction of property. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your story." The police arrived 20 minutes later, along with an ambulance for Arnold, who claimed to be injured, and a fire truck because someone had reported the sirens. The whole street looked like a carnival. Officer Martinez, who'd gone to high school with me, tried not to laugh as he took statements from the paint-covered intruders. "So let me get this straight," he said to Arnold. "You broke into his house to steal from him, but you're the victim here?" "He booby-trapped his own house. That's illegal." "Actually," I said, "it's not. I have every right to protect my property from intruders, and since everything's recorded, you can see that I wasn't here when you decided to break in." Sandra tried a different approach. "Officer, this is my house too. I have a right to be here." Not anymore, I said, pulling out a legal document. As of yesterday, you've been formally evicted. The divorce decree gives you 30 days to remove your personal belongings, but only with supervision and only during daylight hours. Her face went white. You can't do that. I can, and I did. This house was left to me by my grandfather. It was never marital property. The whole scene was being live-streamed by at least 6 different neighbors. By morning, the video of Arnold and Sandra's paint-covered break-in attempt would have millions of views. But the real knockout punch came when Officer Martinez ran their names through the system. "Ma'am," he said to Sandra, "it looks like there's a warrant out for your arrest." Something about embezzlement and fraud? Sandra's knees buckled. "What? That's impossible." "Arnold Klein," Martinez continued, "you're also wanted for questioning regarding falsified business documents and loan fraud." I watched as the 2 people who destroyed my marriage were loaded into separate police cars, still covered in paint and glitter, while the entire neighborhood watched and recorded. Arnold's gym declared bankruptcy the next week. The investigation revealed years of financial fraud, fake certifications, and safety violations. He was looking at serious prison time. Sandra's accounting license was revoked, pending a full investigation into her involvement with Arnold's schemes. The money she'd stolen from our joint accounts to fund his business was considered evidence in a federal fraud case. Isabella Moretti held a press conference. Actually held a press conference to announce that she was severing all ties with the scandal and that Sandra was no longer considered part of the family. Serena, meanwhile, was awarded full ownership of the family estate in her divorce from Arnold, along with substantial alimony that would be paid from his prison wages. As for me, I stood on the lawn of my grandfather's house, watching the police cars disappear into the night, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete satisfaction. Elliot walked up beside me, grinning. "So what now?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the boarding pass I'd already purchased. Montreal. New job, new life, new everything. "What about all this?" He gestured at the house, the neighborhood, the mess that had been my marriage. "Already sold. The new owners take possession next week." I looked at the house one last time, then dropped the keys in the mailbox. Funny thing about blueprints, you can always tear them up and start over, especially when the old ones are covered in paint and lies. My taxi pulled up as Sandra's voice echoed from the police car. "You can't leave me like this! Alex, you can't just walk away!" But I could. And I did. 6 hours later, I was on a plane to Montreal, watching Boston disappear below me. In my carry-on bag was a folder containing my new employment contract, apartment lease, and bank statements showing the money I'd legally transferred out of our joint accounts months before Sandra thought to look. I'd learned something important about revenge. It's not about getting even. It's about getting out. And sometimes, the best way to win is to stop playing their game entirely. The plane banked north, carrying me toward a future where Sandra Russo was nothing but an unpleasant memory and a cautionary tale about what happens when you underestimate the quiet guy in the corner. As we climbed through the clouds, I opened my laptop and started working on blueprints for a new hydroelectric project. Clean energy, sustainable systems, and honest work. Everything my old life hadn't been. Below me, Sandra and Arnold were probably sitting in jail cells, finally facing the consequences of their choices. Above me, nothing but clear skies and endless possibilities. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. But sometimes the best revenge is watching your enemies destroy themselves while you build something better. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my seat, and smiled. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. I belonged. I belonged. I belonged. I belonged. I belonged. I belonged.